Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Nuggets News. Another big week for global and crypto markets. We welcome another 600 new subscribers this week. It's great to have so many new faces joining us, and we did welcome 30 new members this week to our premium area. Head to nuggetsnews.com.au if you want to join us there, guys. A bit of housekeeping to start off with. We are going to be in Sydney at EdCon in April. Hope to see you guys there. And we also have a meetup coming at the end of March in Melbourne. So keep an eye on all our socials and the Nuggets News public Facebook page for those dates and times. Now, to start off with, guys, our thoughts do go out to our friends across the ditch in New Zealand. Just a horrible story to come out of it. And even more, sad to hear is that this was funded in some way by BitConnect. So this is just shocking all around, guys, and our thoughts are with our friends over in New Zealand in these tough times. On this day in crypto history, it's been a year since Google joined Facebook banning crypto ads, only 2 years since Ethereum hit a new all-time high of $30. My target at the time for Ethereum was $100, and that was blown out of the water when we hit well over 1,000. 3 years since Ethereum was added to Bitfinex after their Homestead release. 2015, famously, Blythe Masters left Wall Street to work on Bitcoin in the industry. 2014 was the Mt. Gox fallout continuing, and in 2013, people began using Bitcoin to buy Amazon gift cards. To the local economy now, and the RBA have come out and started cheerleading that everything remains pretty good, that housing downturn's healthy, it's not going to affect the economy, and wage growth will return and unemployment is going to remain low is what they're saying, and they're just setting up for egg on their face. As I spoke about months ago, guys, in the US, the Federal Reserve is going to flip-flop as soon as markets have a tantrum. These central banks are practically lying through their teeth, and as soon as we start to get unemployment tick up and wage growth remains low, I don't see why it would pick up all of a sudden. Conditions are going to deteriorate, and obviously we'll continue to keep you up to date with our monthly economic videos. Over to China now, and although they've been pumping in all that liquidity, there's still a shortage, and some people are speculating on the size of their shadow banking system, and no matter how much money they're pumping in trying to get liquidity into the system, there's just so much debt and it just filters down into the economy. Central banks are finding themselves in an increasingly difficult position where they've been talking about raising rates and ending all this stimulus, but they're just finding that the economy is just completely addicted to this free, cheap, easy money. Now, in the US economy, one of the leading indicators is semiconductor manufacturing. And as we see here, a leading indicator a number of years in the past, and it's just taken a sharp downturn here, and we're already in a downturn for manufacturing growth. So we can expect manufacturing to slow even further in the coming months, which is something we want to keep an eye on. Now, US treasuries have been dumped the most in a decade, as we see here. So this is the international capital monthly flows of money in and out of US bonds. And this is, as it says in the title, guys, some of the biggest flows we've seen for a while now. Keep an eye on this. I'm going to talk about bond yields further in just a second. Now, US have sanctioned Russian bank over links to the Venezuelan petro. And we're starting to see this interesting dynamic between countries that are starting to settle trade in cryptocurrencies and those that are obviously sanctioning because they're using crypto to get around other sanctions. So this is another thing that can add to the tensions between countries. In Venezuela this week, we saw the power grid go down and the number of Bitcoin transactions had a sharp decrease because it's become so popular. And when there's no power, it's obviously harder to buy, sell, and trade Bitcoin. Now, there are ways around that, and we'll see the free market create different measures if power remains scarce in Venezuela. But launching a war drill to secure the power grid, they're just going through such a tough time in Venezuela at the moment. And it's interesting to see that one of their leading economists has come out and said that cryptocurrency is good money. And this is the dynamic between some central banks saying we're not even acknowledging crypto, it's no good, it's not money. And here we see a country that has felt the full brink of hyperinflation and fiat money and debasement of their currency. And they're saying, well, no, we believe cryptocurrency is a good money. Now, the Fed this week started hinting at QE5. As always, it's going to be a little bit like Operation Twist, where it has a slightly different feel to it, but the premise is the same, guys. We've been saying this on the channel for probably a year now that the Fed aren't going to continue to raise interest rates, and they're going to have to go back to printing more money like all economies are at some stage. And this week, a good Zero Hedge article if you want to read the details on QE5 possibly coming. Now, no chart shows this better than this historical bond yield. So this is the 10-year US Treasury bond. And back in the 80s when we had that run up in inflation and we were still on the gold standard there, inflation gets to 16%. Ever since, it has just been falling. And the whole macro theme has been that, yes, interest rates had hit their record lows. As we zoom in here, when the Fed ended QE and money printing and whatnot, interest rates were going to start to rise, get back to normal levels between 3 and 5%, 7% traditionally. But what we've seen just lately, since the end of last year when markets have had that tantrum, is the smartest money in the market, the bond market money, has started to turn down and predict lower interest rates. They don't believe that the economy can withstand high interest rates, and there's been a rush back into treasury bonds to get that yield. Now, if you had to pick one reason only to own Bitcoin, it's that central banks are now openly talking about QE5 money printing, doesn't matter what country you're in. And the ECB literally on Twitter this week bragging about how they can print money out of thin air to buy assets. And imagine if we all had that same luxury. In a similar vein of thought, guys, there was a piece tweeted by Whale Panda a couple of days ago saying, and I wanted to build off this, that all centrally issued US dollar stablecoins rely on fiat money being kept in a bank. Now, we know if we deposit $1 million there, banks lend that out to everyone and keep a fraction of the reserves. So by that very nature, some of these stablecoins, even people speculating about Tether, whether it's backed or not, we know that that money is not there if it's in a bank. We know there's only a fraction of it there. And just by that very metric, stablecoins in theory are only worth cents on the dollar if we had a run on the banks or any sort of liquidity crisis. So for me, I'm sticking with Maker, synthetics, gold-backed coins, anything that I know is fully or over-collateralized, no fractional reserves for me. We've had a few different regulatory bodies get in discussions with industry this week, and it was great to see this happen in Canada. In the US, they said they're going to go out and have meetups with all sorts of leaders in the fintech community. Over in Germany, building out a task force for a legal framework. And obviously this week, I was lucky enough to speak to Treasury. Now, for our premium members, I did a deep dive into what we were sort of discussing and how I think this is all going to play out. But it's good that they're collaborating with industry professionals. Whether or not anything comes of it remains to be seen, because there's probably 2 dozen countries now where you're better off if you've got a utility. There's just more knowns. A lot of these Australian projects are facing so many unknowns in terms of, tax, stability, frameworks, how they can do it compliantly. And it's really hard to get good advice, and it's very expensive to get that advice if there even is anyone that knows what they're talking about. Now, similar vein of thought here, the Basel Committee has come out and said that cryptocurrencies do pose a risk to banks. So as we just touched on, interesting, Venezuela saying this is great, it's real money. One of my picks for 2019, one of my predictions was that central banks are going to flip-flop from saying that cryptos are nothing to really pay attention to them being too big to ignore. And this is the first time we've really seen this, saying that they do pose a risk to banks. And that is because as banks want to print more money, central banks are going to have to do another round of easing. And this is the first time that cryptocurrency has been mainstream, when they turn on the taps again and people say, we don't want to be diluted, lose our purchasing power. We're going to park our money in some cryptocurrency. And I think that theme is just going to continue forever. Now, what we've seen this week in Australia was Aussie school kids protesting climate change. Now, put your personal thoughts on climate change aside. I certainly think there's been some changes in the weather, whether or not that is solely caused by our carbon emissions or part of a bigger natural cycle. That's what is hotly debated. I don't want to turn this into a political video. But what I do want to say is that look at all these occurrences. Brexit, Trump, Occupy Wall Street, the Yellow Vest. People are unhappy and they know they can bring about change by taking to the streets, and politicians aren't doing enough. And this week, the Yellow Vest protests heated up again. Now, they've been relatively calm the last few weeks, but setting banks on fire. French have the higher tax rates there, and I believe that sooner or later the politicians are going to give in. They can't have this continue for the local economy. Okay, so into the crypto news. And last night, thanks to everyone that joined us for our ultimate altcoin hangout. We went over technical and fundamental analysis for a number of coins you guys asked me. And thanks to Mick, who did do timestamps for everything we talked about. If you guys want to check that out, I have sent a bit of crypto their way. Now, Crypto Lark tweeted that he was donating some Binance to help that charity initiative, and I said, very happy to comply. Nuggets News does do a little bit of work for Care for Africa, and I said that I'd still love to see Binance collaborate with Horizon State, because at one stage there, they got into some initial talks, and nothing really came of it, but I think there's so much synergy there with their charity initiative, and it was great to see CZ reach out and say, let's do it. So hopefully something comes of that. We know Horizon State have Nemo in charge now, rather than Oren, who was talking to CZ last time. So fingers crossed something comes there. Now, there's been plenty of altcoin news this week, guys, and we've been trying to cover at least 10 items every second day, the big altcoin items that are often missed by the other websites. So daily 10 on nuggetsnews.com.au. You can get these emailed to you as well, guys. But Cosmos launched, and this nearly did 100x return for those initial investors. And it's an IOU token. It's not even the real token for their mainnet yet, which is super interesting to me that we're seeing projects launch at 100x in the middle of what's meant to be crypto winter. Now, MakerDAI got a Lightning network of sorts. So you guys know that I think that the stablecoin has got so many use cases, and that DAI card is a second layer network that utilizes state channels. You can think of it as a Lightning network for stablecoin payments. Bittrex announced their Binance-like token sale for Korean game data. Now, at the last minute, we saw them pull out. I'm going to talk about initial exchange offerings a little bit more, but I think every exchange is about to heat up in that space, and I did an emergency video for members in the middle of the week about how I see this playing out and what coins are going to benefit from that and whatnot. And breakthrough for Ethereum, we saw that EOS Ethereum interoperability, Bancor. We're starting to see all these different cross-chain mechanisms functioning, and it's fantastic to see. Chinese insurance giant Ping An partners with decentralized AI startup SingularityNet. Now, this was one that was highly speculative that we covered. I think we were the first video on YouTube to do fundamental analysis on SingularityNet, and they're starting to gain traction. They've been on Joe Rogan, getting some good partnerships. This is what I absolutely love to see, guys. And we did a lot of time and research before we chose to put any project on the channel. We've never done paid promotion, so hopefully a lot of these projects are coming out now. They've been busy building in the crypto winter. IOTA has leapt into decentralization. You guys know the one thing I've been saying is IOTA needs to remove that coordinated system that has very much control over what transactions are taking place. Similar to how EOS has these elected nodes that can choose to freeze funds or reverse transactions, that's what a coordinator is in that Tangle IOTA system. So I've introduced ZNet, a hell of a lot more. Check out this article on Crypto News Z, but very promising for IOTA, and there hasn't been a lot of movement in price. This is certainly one that we're watching for a trade in our premium members area. Now, MakerDAI continues to remain below $1, and when we look at the actual Maker system, when we're minting DAI, it is always worth $1. So what you can do at the moment, guys, if it's trading for 96 cents on exchanges, you can pick it up and sell it for $1. And this is an arbitrage opportunity that I know a few of our more advanced traders have been taking advantage of. Over to Ripple, and some good news for Ripple holders. I'm launching this $100 million fund for game developers, and Ripple's is probably a good use case for gaming with their centralization. The way it works, it's got fast transactions. But what I am a little bit worried about here was this uncovering of the massive army. And some people have said that they don't think this is real. Guys, they've discovered thousands and thousands of accounts through analysis. And I know that whenever I put out a tweet, there's just bots with XRP in their name, or people just commenting XRP and not saying anything else. It's pretty frustrating. I don't know. I'll be interested to hear, what do you Ripple holders think about this? Is this being blown out of proportions, or have you noticed this being an issue as well? Here's just a list of some of the accounts that have been uncovered. But the last thing I want to talk about is Ripple as a means for cross-border payments and other banks coming out. We saw JP Morgan coin came out. I said a while ago that every bank is going to have their own coin, and now we see IBM hinting at their own stable coin for cross-border payments. So every single bank is going to have their own. I don't think they're going to buy up tokens of someone else's and pay a lot of money when they can create their own for free, and if anything, make money off other people using theirs and charging clients fees. So again, I feel like I'm always sort of talking about the headwinds for Ripple. There's already banks signed on to use their system, XRapid. Whether or not that leads to the XRP token being used, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Now, Coinbase Pro have listed Stellar Lumens. This is one that we've sort of been waiting for. It's finally come to fruition. These guys have branched out and chased other use cases rather than just interbank payments. And that's, again, it's probably why it's good to see Ripple trying to get into the gaming industry and diversify because of those headwinds that we just mentioned. Good news for Bancorus, which is a project that we covered a while ago. They came to Australia. We had Greg on the channel. It is one that I've personally invested in the STO field. These guys have joined one of the big accords in the STO space, but getting an investment from T0 subsidiary Overstock is a big vote of confidence in Medici Ventures there. These guys are trying to build an all-in-one, platform to raise money, trade security tokens, banking licenses. They want it all. Hopefully they can get all those licenses throughout China, throughout Europe, and that is going to be hopefully a very successful STO project. Now, as I mentioned before, Bittrex had the first Launchpad projects ready to go, and they pulled out last minute. And this is a scramble. As I tweeted, there's been absolute mayhem behind the scenes in the world of exchanges because Binance Launchpad has been so popular. Every other exchange now wants to bring out their own Launchpad, and this one almost slipped through the cracks. A project that was not that great, and they were rushing to launch it, and at the last minute they worked out that everything's not right here. We're going to have to pull out. Some of the partnerships they had promised turned out to be invalid, and guys, you've always got to do your own due diligence. Just because it's on an exchange and a launchpad doesn't mean it's a good project. And as I've said before, some of these projects are selling 5 to 10% of the tokens. There's 90% overhang that is going to come into the market in the coming months and years and put downwards pressure on the price. Into the Ethereum news now. So that Beacon testnet is getting pretty close to launch, some of the developers say. Now, a lot of people aren't aware that Ethereum is about to launch an entirely new chain, and I'll be making a video about that for you guys this week. Some of these changes that are going to bring about up to 270,000 transactions per second in phase 1 of that proof of stake Beacon chain. I don't want to go into this too much. As I said, I'll do a detailed video this week, but in the meantime, we're going to have to implement this change to the program proof of work because ASICs have become responsible for so much hash power on the network. And now, last week we saw Monero implement that hard fork to get rid of the ASIC miners, and I think their hash rate dropped by around 60%. So it's going to be interesting to see how much Ethereum's hash rate does drop if they implement this change, making the algorithm resistant to ASICs until we're fully switched over to the new Ethereum chain. Now, this week we saw a Bitcoin ATM double spend attack, and this was one of the reasons that I stated I saw a lot of headwinds for any ATM company coming out. The way that ATMs work are, some of them allow you to withdraw money with what we call zero confirmation, so you don't have to wait around for an hour to get money out for your Bitcoin transaction to confirm with the 10-minute blocks. So what these guys do is send your Bitcoin to the ATM machine, it spits your money out, and then you send the same transaction with a higher fee, and it gets included in the next block before your other transaction, and they defrauded this ATM. Now, whether or not this is fraud because you are using the rules of the blockchain, but these guys got away with I think it was around $200,000 here by using the double spend problem. And this is the problem with zero confirmation transactions at this stage. Now, news this week that the SIBO have pulled the pin on their Bitcoin futures. And here we see this arrow where Bitcoin futures launched. It's been all downhill. The last contract is going to trade in June or July. The majority of Bitcoin futures volume happens on the CME market, so I'm not too worried about SIBO closing their contract. I don't think Bitcoin really has a place on the futures market. Bitcoin trades 24 hours a day. At some stage, it's going to break that system that only trades a few hours a day, a few days a week. It just doesn't fit that Bitcoin mold. CME have come out and said that they have no change to change their futures trading. As I said, they've got the majority of volume there, so if you're a futures trader, you can still speculate on the Bitcoin price. They're cash settled, not backed by Bitcoin, not my thing. Bitfury bringing Lightning payments to US payment gateway Haid Pay. So now we have Lightning Network up and running. I think we passed 1,000 nodes this week, 1,000 Bitcoin capacity, up 53% in a month. This continues to grow at a ridiculous pace. Now we need companies and individuals to start using it, and that just frees up the mainnet even more. We've got plenty of transactions happening on the Bitcoin network, and fees are 100 times lower than last time the network had this much throughput. When fees got to $50, they're now less than 50 cents for the average transaction. It's great to see the network growing and maturing, heading in the right direction. Now, I used to be a Bitcoin maximalist, and it was really hard for me to look at any other altcoins seriously until Ethereum came along in 2015, 2016. And I still believe Bitcoin is king. You guys know I believe that everyone should have a large percentage of their portfolio in Bitcoin. And a lot of people said to me, how can you say 99% of projects will fail? There's only 2,000 coins on CoinMarketCap. Well, guys, there's more like at least 10,000 projects out there now. And I do believe there's only going to really be 100, maybe 200 that are going to be really successful. And there's a lot of innovation happening in this space. There's so many good projects out there. A couple of hundred isn't a small number, but being disrespectful to every other individual and startup in this business, just saying, no, it's Bitcoin or it's the highway, everything else is crap. I just think that's a bit disrespectful when you're telling everyone that they're wasting their time and that you know better than them. So that's my thoughts on Bitcoin maximalism. Let me know yours in the comments below. Into the technical analysis. Now, Litecoin's been leading the way. We've said that Litecoin hopefully is going to continue to lead the way as it reaches its halving event long before Bitcoin. So you'll see here Litecoin's tested its 200-day moving average, come back and retest it again, continues to power higher using these exponential moving averages. A lot of you traders have been getting in here and just riding this up, and it's a little bit more extended than Bitcoin and Ethereum. I think everything is coming up to a time where it's going to have a little breather before we really test some higher levels in the coming weeks. So if we have a look at Ethereum, you'll see it's still well under its 200-day moving average. $165 is the next key level we're targeting. And we can get a bit of a push up here from this cycle bracket in the coming days. But it's Bitcoin that all eyes are still really on. And we're watching this inverse head and shoulders pattern. It's still very much on the cards. We're riding those moving averages. If we lose these, I'll just take this off auto here, guys. If we lose these, we're looking down here at the 50-day moving average. But at the moment, you'd have to say we're forming higher lows. There's been some okay volume coming in. If this inverse head and shoulders pattern plays out, obviously our target is up here around $4,500, which should be a big vote of confidence for everyone that's been waiting and watching. And this is a bottoming pattern. So we're still in the bear market. It's $6,000 way overhead. That is the real resistance that's going to get more people excited and put a final end to that bear market. So one step at a time, guys. We do have our cycle brackets pushing down into the 23rd of March. So a perfect scenario if we're going to continue for the next few days would be coming back to retest this level that's been resistance to act as support around 4,100. If we do turn over now, we're hoping that it's not too deep, it's on lighter volume, and then we get another push up around the 24th of March. So thanks for tuning in, guys. I hope to see more of you members over in our premium area. It's been fantastic lately. Everyone is enjoying themselves and educating in a bear market. So many new people coming into the space is really exciting to see. Smash that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, share these videos around, and thanks for tuning in, guys. Cheers.